Good morning, guys. It's Keisha Henry with Healing of the Heart podcast, New Beginning Healing Institute. How are you this morning? It's Sunday morning. It's now about 9:30. Just before I run out the door, you probably saw my post this morning saying that I wanted to give an update. So, you know what? The podcast last night, it did not record. It did not record. My husband got on and said, he was like kind of signaling to me, something's wrong, something's wrong. And as you know, I changed the time for the podcast because it's such a heavy topic, and I know that I would need more time than from 7 to 8. And the later time, I don't believe that our attention span would have been the greatest at 7 to 8 o'clock. So I changed the time from 6 to 7. So I was prepared for this. And I guess I don't know what happened. The plugs, I had everything set up, and there's one plug that did not get into the proper place, and so the recording did not happen. I'm so disappointed, and I was feeling a lot dejected last night. And then as I wound down my evening, I meditated on that, and I'm like, you know what, everything happens for a purpose. It has to, maybe not a purpose that I can understand or readily see, but it did. I did the podcast, it just did not record. And so this morning I got up and I realized that the podcast obviously, is meant for more persons to hear. So, and I have to say thank you to those of you who logged on to the podcast last night. And to be honest, this podcast had a lot more people logging on for a live podcast than prior podcast sessions. I mean, there are a lot of persons that are downloading the podcast, but for this particular podcast, there are a lot more persons that were live for this particular podcast. Pardon the background, someone's cutting their yard next door. And so I get the feeling that, so now this morning I woke up and I realized that even though I was feeling so dejected, so disappointed about this podcast not recording, it's one that's very dear to my heart, because grief is really a universal experience. And right now we're all going through grief in some way, shape, or form. And so I want to just briefly tell you, number one, it did not record. And I feel so badly about that, but I owe it to you to tell you that it did not record and why it did not record, because a lot of people are on last night looking to hear the content and nothing came across. So my apologies for that, number one. But in that, I learned a lot last night. I learned about different things on the monitoring board, and even within Podbean itself. I learned so much last night. So nothing is wasted, especially when you put your all and your heart into something, which is exactly what I did last night. And then, so that's the second thing I learned. Number one, my apologies in explaining what happened, but I did learn a lot last night in this experience that I will take forward in this podcast. That, thirdly, that I will be redoing. And I felt like, Lord, I can't do this podcast again. It was heavy, but I realized a lot of gifts in that podcast, and I'm sure more will come. And so, I'm doing this podcast again on Saturday. So it's going to be Saturday the 25th. So I'm doing, it's called, grief, what it does, but what you can do. And I just have continued. So you'll see the posts coming throughout the week that we're going to do it again. And then a gift came for me this morning. As I was getting up, I looked at my phone to see what time it was. And I saw that one of my colleagues from college, as a matter of fact, when I was in college, she was my RA. You probably see her on my page. Her name is Roz Zeman, but she goes by her married name, Roslyn McCaleb. And she said, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry that I missed this one. And, she was speaking about her own experiences with her own grief. And and that was another gift. It was a prompting to say, you know what, you should do this just do it again. And so it was just a gift, another, nudge, another confirmation. This is important stuff. And then, again, I was just looking over, the post I was making this morning and looking at the potential persons that were looking, the listeners who were looking, and there are people listening to this particular subject matter or want to listen to this particular subject matter all over the country and all over the world. And I'm just like blown away by that. So again, I apologize, and I learned, and in the midst of this setback, if you will, or disappointment, so many gifts and just so many, what's the word I'm looking for, realizations. And so this is the update I wanted to provide to you. And so, just to summarize again, or just to close then, the podcast will be done again. this Saturday at 6 p.m. So we're going to the new time because it seems as though that's a better time for a lot of people listening, in the, throughout the country or whatever, or wherever, even locally here. And yeah, so that's my update. Thank you for joining me last night. Those who joined again and did not get a chance to hear the content, yeah, my husband was upset. A lot of us were just so disappointed. But again, there was a purpose for it, and I'm beginning to see some of that now. So thank you for watching this update video this morning. I hope you have a great Sunday, and I'm going to be posting this video at 10 o'clock and again at 2 o'clock, particularly for those who were joining or did join last night and did not get a chance to hear the content. And you're probably wondering what happened. So I feel very much that I do owe this explanation, and we are a community, and I want us to continue that way. Thank you so much. Have a great Sunday, guys. And my clicker is not working, so I have to come up and stop it. Bye, guys.